late afternoon sun, already weak in the English summer sky, stretched the shadows long and thin across the makeshift shooting range at Ashdown Pines. Eleanor Vance, barely 17 years of age, felt the cool sweat trickle on her brow as she adjusted her grip on the old 22 caliber training rifle. It was heavy, a solid, unforgiving weight in her hands, yet oddly, it felt a natural fit, not a dainty thing, but one built for purpose, like the flint tools her grandmother had once told stories about, found sometimes in the fields back home in Berkshire. Ashdown Pines was nestled deep within the Chiltern Hills, a scattering of rough-hewn cabins and a main hall by a small, brittle lake, more suited for canoeing and campfire tales than for the stark realities of marksmanship.
Beginner's luck, Eleanor?
Most of the youngsters here were typical 6- formers, hoping to add a respectable line to their UCIS application. Summer camp counselor responsibilities include child care and outdoor activities. Shooting lessons were a new addition. Deemed character-building by the camp's owner, a retired Army colonel with a penchant for Tweeden tradition. Steady your breath. Lass, called Alistair Finch. He was the camp's survival instructor, a man cast from granite and silence, in his early 50s with hands like gnarled oak roots and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of forgotten country lanes and distant, harsher lands. Most of the other counselors knew little of his past, only that he'd seen service somewhere, sometime, and preferred the company of the ancient woods to idle chatter. He was a man who understood the rhythm of the land and the quiet struggles of those who walked it. Eleanor squinted through the rifle's basic iron sights. A hazy, indistinct cross against the crisp white of the paper target 50 yards downrange. Around her, a chorus of adolescent frustration punctuated the otherwise peaceful drone of summer. Tom Davies, a lanky lad from Birmingham, had missed the target entirely 3 times running, his attempts punctuated by a sort of bewildered indignation. Clara Jenkins, all delicate hands and a nervous laugh, flinched violently each time the rifle bumped, as if personally affronted by the noise. "Right, that's me up. Done," muttered George Miller, a stocky boy with a permanently sheepish grin, lowering his rifle after sending yet another shot wide of the mark. "My old man always said I couldn't hit a cow's backside with a banjo." Eleanor, usually one to join in the good-natured banter, found herself shutting out the noise. Alistair's earlier words echoed in her mind. "Find your natural pause. Let the breath settle, like dust on a quiet evening." She did just that. Her lungs filled, then emptied, then paused. A brief, still moment. The trigger, a smooth, measured pressure, not a jolt. Whack. The report was sharp, cutting through the summery air. Through the cheap scout, a tiny, neat hole appeared, almost dead center. Beginner's luck. Dowie? Tom called out, a touch of incredulity in his voice. That? Alistair Finch was already moving. Slower, deliberate stride towards Eleanor's target. His face, usually a study in weather-beaten impassivity, offered no clue. He pulled the target from its wooden frame, examining the precise shot placement with an intensity that made the surrounding chatter wither and die. He turned, his gaze fixed on Eleanor, searching her face for something she couldn't name. "Again," Alistair said.
I will think about it.
His voice a low rumble, devoid of judgment or praise. Oh, he returned to stand behind her, silent, watchful presence. "Take your time, lass. No rush." Eleanor reloaded, a familiar cold steel a comfort against her palms. This time, she was acutely aware of Alistair's scrutiny, felt the weight of his gaze on her back, observing every subtle shift of her posture, the natural set of her shoulders, the way her fingers seemed to know the rifle's contours instinctively. It was as if he was watching a wild bird take flight, searching for the patterns of its wing beats. The second shot was even better, punching through the paper a hair's breadth from the first. A collective murmur rippled through the group. Clara Jenkins shook her head, her fair hair glinting in the dappled sunlight. That's just not fair. Nobody shoots like that on their first try. Alistair remained silent. But Eleanor caught the fleeting movement of his hand as he pulled a small war notebook from his pocket, making a brief, cryptic note. There was something in his eyes, a deep, almost knowing glint that suggested he saw more than just a lucky streak. He saw a nascent force, a talent stirring. Over the next hour, Eleanor's performance continued to astonish. While the others struggled to land their shots consistently, she was grouping hers tightly. Within an inch or two, even as Alistair subtly increased the distance, moving the targets further and further away, challenging her at ranges that would have taxed even seasoned shooters. Her innate ability was becoming undeniable, a quiet storm breaking over the placid waters of the summer camp. It was a raw, undeniable gift, like a sudden and biting spring appearing on parched land. After the session drew to a close, and the other counselors, chastened but still chattering, began to drift back towards the main camp. Alistair approached Eleanor as she meticulously cleaned her rifle. The late afternoon sun now cast long, skeletal shadows of the ancient oak trees across the range, and the faint, joyful shouts of children playing by the lake drifted, almost mournfully, over the gentle slopes of the Chilterns. The peace was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the small, precise violence of the rifle. "You've done this before," Alistair stated, his voice low, a statement rather than a question. Eleanor shook her head, running a cloth carefully along the barrel. "Never. My folks, they don't hold with guns. Think they're too dangerous. Not for your average person to own. Mum always says, there's enough trouble in the world without looking for more. Larve." Alistair's gaze was unwavering.
Why are you teaching me these
Searching
things,
her face for any flicker of deception. "Your stance is too natural. Her breathing control to steady. Someone taught you the fundamentals, even if you don't recall it." He seemed to pierce through her words,
Have you ever had to use
reaching
these
for
skills
something
outside the
deeper,
practice range, sir?
something elemental. "I swear, Mr. Finch, I've never held a proper rifle until yesterday," Eleanor insisted, her voice firm, a hint of steel she hadn't known she possessed. "Maybe a few video games, but that's hardly the same, is it?" Alistair remained silent for a long moment, watching as Eleanor Field Minus stripped the rifle with movements that seemed practiced, despite her protests of inexperience. She handled the intricate parts with a quiet confidence, as if she were born to it. There was something about her that reminded him of the rare recruits HED encountered decades ago, those few who possessed an almost mystical, innate understanding of marksmanship, a connection to the tool and its purpose that others spent years striving for. They were the ones who didn't just learn, but knew. "What do you plan to do after your A- levels?" Then, Alistair asked, shifting the conversation, his eyes still distant, as if seeing beyond the summer camp to a horizon Eleanor couldn't yet perceive. Eleanor shrugged, a question a well-worn path in her mind. "University. I suppose. My parents want me to study business or maybe medicine. Something, sensible. Something that'll guarantee a good job and a stable future. You know, a nice little house, a pension." It was the familiar refrain of generations, the working man's aspiration for his children to rise, to find comfort and security. "And what do you want?" Alistair pressed, his voice soft but persistent, like the persistent trickle of an underground spring. Eleanor paused in her cleaning, her hands still, and looked out across the quiet range, towards the darkening woods. The question hung in the air. "Heavy and true. I don't know. Something that matters, I suppose. Something where I can make a real difference, rather than just shuffling papers." The words felt oddly vulnerable, a confession she hadn't known she needed to make. Alistair nodded slowly. He had heard similar sentiments from young soldiers, bronze eager, who later became some of the finest marksmen he had ever trained. There was something special about Eleanor Vance, a natural talent that couldn't be taught, only nurtured and refined, like a rare, stubborn seed growing against all odds. Would you be interested in some additional instruction? Alistair asked casually, his gaze now fixed on her, assessing, I could work with you after the regular camp activities. Help you develop these skills of yours. Eleanor looked surprised, the idea utterly foreign. You do that? Why? Alistair was quiet for a moment, his mind drifting back decades, to a grizzled sergeant with kind eyes in the gruff manner who had seen potential in a raw recruit and taken the time to hone it. He dittoed, perhaps, to the flow of time and the endless turning of the seasons. Because talent like yours shouldn't go to waste.
I understand the gravity of these skills.
Less, and because I believe you could be something truly exceptional with the right guidance. He saw not just a skilled hand, but a deep, quiet resolve in her eyes. Eleanor felt a flutter of excitement, a strange, exhilarating spark mixed with a familiar knot of uncertainty. There was something about Alistair, despite his reserved nature, that inspired an almost primal trust. She had never met anyone who took her so seriously, who saw past the dutiful daughter to the restless spirit beneath.
It depends on what you want.
What kind of training are you talking about? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Advanced marksmanship, proper technique, different rifles, various distances and conditions. Alistair replied, his voice a low, gravely promise. I can teach you things most people never learn, things hidden from the common gaze. Eleanor bit her lip, imagining her parents' reaction. They had only allowed her to take the summer camp job because it would look good on her Evie for university. They certainly hadn't envisioned her discovering a burgeoning passion for firearms. You'd have to think on it, she said, finally, her gaze lingering on the rifle. Alistair nodded. Take your time. But, Eleanor, understand that what you did today doesn't happen by accident. You have a gift, and gifts, like the harvest, always come with a certain responsibility. As they walked back towards the main camp buildings, the scent of pine and damp earth heavy in the twilight, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that this quiet conversation was somehow eroding the very course of her life. She had always been a good student, diligently following the well-trodden path her parents had laid out for her. But she had never felt truly passionate about anything. Now, for the first time, she had discovered something that felt inherently right. Something that stirred her blood in a way that chemistry homework never could. The weight of the rifle, the absolute precision required, the intense, almost meditative focus needed to make the perfect shot. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known she was trying to solve. It was a call from the deep, ancient earth itself. That evening, as Eleanor lay in her narrow camp bunk, listening to the muffled chatter of the other counselors about their days and their mundane plans for the future, her thoughts were consumed by Alistair's offer. There was something in his eyes when he watched her shoot, a recognition that transcended simple approval. It was as if he saw potential within her that even she, with all her nascent skill, couldn't yet comprehend. The quiet struggle now was whether she had the courage to explore it, to step off the safe path and into the unknown. The next morning, before the first rays of proper light had fully pierced the canopy of the ancient woods, Eleanor found Alistair setting up targets at the far end of the range. He had placed them at various distances, some partially hidden behind gnarled trees and thick brush, as if testing the very spirit of the hunter. When he saw her approaching, he offered no surprise, just a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I've been thinking about your offer, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the nervous energy that thrummed beneath her skin, a wild current she was only just learning to navigate. I'd like to try the advanced training. Alistair merely nodded again and reached for a different rifle, one heavier than the 22, with a proper scope mounted atop its dark, gleaming barrel. It was a more serious instrument, built for graver tasks. This is a hunting rifle, he explained, his voice low and rich like the earth itself, more accurate than the camp guns, but it demands a finer touch, a deeper understanding. Eleanor took the weapon.
talking about
The difference
intelligence
in balance and weight was immediate, profound. Everything about it felt more significant, more purposeful, like holding a piece of history that still had work to do. Where did you learn to
How did
shoot
anyone
like
find
this?
out about my secret
She
training?
asked, her voice hushed, examining the rifle with a reverence born of awakening respect. The military. Alistair replied simply, his gaze drifted into the distant, rolling hills. I spent 20 years in service, in places where precision shooting was a sport. Yes, it was the difference between life and death. The difference between coming home and staying in a foreign field.
What exactly
A
did
chill,
Caldwell and the
not
government
of the
want from
morning
me?
air, traced its way down Eleanor's spine. She had suspected his background was more extensive than he let on. Hearing him speak of such stark realities made the metal in her hands feel colder, heavier, charged with
Sounds like a
unspoken
hidden world I
truths.
never imagined.
Or are you a sniper? She asked quietly, the word feeling alien on her tongue. Alistair was silent for a long moment, adjusting the scope on yet another
Part of me
rifle.
wants to seize
His
this
movements
opportunity,
deliberate,
but
ritualistic.
another part of me
I
is
was
afraid.
many things. Today, and your instructor. That's what matters. He moved with the quiet grace of a man who had long ago mastered his own body and the
Do you
tools of his
believe I
trade.
am ready
He
for such
showed her how to
responsibility?
properly use the scope, explaining concepts like parallax and I relief terms utterly new to her. Yet she absorbed every word, asking questions that demonstrated a natural, almost intuitive grasp of the principles involved. Most folk think shooting is just about pulling the trigger. Alistair explained as Eleanor settled into a prone position, the damn purse cool beneath her. But it's really about controlling every variable you can, and accepting the ones you can't. The wind, the dampness in the air, the cold, your own heartbeat, they all tug at the shot. I can see in hands. Eleanor peered through the scope at a target 200 yards away. At this distance, it looked impossibly small, a mere fleck of white against the dark earth. But Alistair assured her it was well within the rifle's capability. How do you account for all those variables? She asked, her voice tight with concentration, experience. Alistair said, a damn sight of practice. But first, you need to master the fundamentals. Every shot should be identical in terms of your position. Your breathing, your trigger pull, consistency. Yes, this everything, it's the bedrock. Over the next hour, Alistair guided Eleanor through a series of increasingly challenging shots. She missed more often at these longer distances, the minute errors amplified by the greater range. But her hits, when they came, were impressively accurate for someone with so little practical experience. Alistair found himself drifting back to his own early training, remembering the long, frustrating years it had taken him to achieve the level of precision that Eleanor seemed to demonstrate naturally. Almost as if the skill were simply waiting to be called forth. You're overthinking the wind compensation. Alistair observed after Eleanor missed a shot to the left. His voice a quiet correction. Trust your instincts more. Your subconscious, it's processing information faster than your analytical mind. Like an ancient weather vane sensing the coming change, Eleanor adjusted her aim. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift in her body, and fired again. This time, the bullet struck within inches of the bullseye. She looked up at Alistair, a flicker of excitement in her eyes. But his expression remained neutral, a quiet acceptance. Better, he said simply. Don't get cocky. The moment you think you've mastered this, Eleanor, is the moment you start making mistakes. The land is always ready to humble you. As the training session continued, Alistair began to share more details about advanced marksmanship. His words sparse, but laden with knowledge gleaned from hard -1 experience. He explained how professional snipers calculated distances, how they read environmental conditions not just by instruments, but by the subtle rustle of leaves, the dance of distant heat haze, the very scent of the coming rain. He spoke of the meticulous care of equipment. A rifle not just a tool, but an extension of the marksman's will. Eleanor listened intently, asking intelligent questions that showed a burgeoning understanding of the profound complexity of the discipline. Why are you teaching me all this? Eleanor asked during a break, her voice filled with a quiet earnestness. This seemed like military knowledge, not summer camp stuff. Alistair cleaned his rifle methodically, his movements precise and economical, before answering, because you have the potential to be exceptional at this, and because, in my experience, folk with your level of natural ability often find themselves in situations where these skills, they matter deeply. What kind of situations? Eleanor pressed, our curiosity now a burning flame. That's not for me to decide, Alistair replied, his gaze distant again, fixed on some unseen horizon. But I've learned that when someone has a gift, it's usually for a reason. The universe, it doesn't waste talent. Not truly. It plants it where it might be needed. Eleanor felt a mixture of awe and apprehension at his words. Part of her was captivated by Alistair's obvious expertise and the immense trust he was placing in her by sharing these profound details. Another part, however, was grappling with the harsh reality of what he was describing. Have you ever had to, she began, then stop. And try to face the terrible question. Use these skills in combat? Alistair finished for her, his voice now tinged with memory. Yes. Less. More times than I care to remember. Does that bother you? He looked out across the range, the quiet hills seeming to absorb his words. Every shot I took in service was to protect innocent people. Or my comrades. That doesn't make it easy. Not by a long chalk, but it makes it necessary. The weight of those decisions is something every person who develops these skills has to carry. It's a heavy burden, a shadow that never quite leaves you. Eleanor absorbed this soberly. She was beginning to understand that what Alistair was teaching her was merely a hobby or a sport. It was a skill-set burden with serious moral implications, a path paved with terrible choices. I want to continue learning, she said finally, her voice firm, resolute. I want to understand everything, not just the technical aspects. I want to know about the responsibility that comes with these abilities. With this power, Alistair looked at her, and this time there was a faint, almost imperceptible glimmer of approval in his eyes. That's the right attitude, Eleanor. Too many focus on the power of precision shooting without truly grasping the responsibility. We'll cover both. It's the only honest way. Over the following days, Alistair's training intensified, stretching Eleanor's mind and body to their limits. He taught her about ballistics, the arcane science of a bullet's flight, about meteorology, how to read the subtle nuances of the air itself, and about fieldcraft, the art of blending with the land, of moving unseen and unheard. She learned to estimate distances without tools, to read wind patterns by watching the shimmer of grass and the dance of leaves, and to remain perfectly still for extended periods, becoming one with the earth. More importantly, Alistair began to discuss the profound ethical considerations of marksmanship. He spoke of the sacred rules of engagement, the paramount importance of target identification, and the deep psychological preparation required for high-stakes shooting. A true marksman, Eleanor, never takes a shot unless they're absolutely certain of their target and the consequences. Doubt, even a whisper of it, means you don't shoot. Period. It's a burden you carry, not a game you play. Eleanor found herself thinking about these lessons long after the training sessions ended, even in the quiet moments back at her bunk. She was discovering not just a skill, but a philosophy, a way of being that demanded the highest levels of discipline, moral clarity, and an almost spiritual connection to the task. As her accuracy improved dramatically, Alistair introduced new challenges. Moving targets that appeared and vanished like ghosts, low-like conditions that tested her perception, and shots from awkward
return to a normal
positions that
life.
twisted her body into unnatural
The world will
angles
still
all became
call on
part
you
of her daily regimen. With each session, Eleanor's confidence grew. So too did her understanding of the immense, almost crushing responsibility that came with her developing abilities. The knowledge settled deep in her bones, a truth both exhilarating and terrifying. The other
need some
camp
time to think about
counselors,
this before I
though
give you an answer.
preoccupied with their own youthful concerns, began to notice Eleanor's increasing devotion to the rifle range. They assumed she was simply enthusiastic about the basic shooting program, a keen student. None of them suspected the true nature of her training, a regimen that would challenge
make a
experienced
difference.
hunters and competitive shooters, preparing her for a world they could scarcely imagine. Alistair maintained his quiet, almost stoic demeanor around the rest of the camp staff.
Are you all right in here?
Eleanor could see the quiet satisfaction in his
scared,
eyes, a subtle
but I'm also
approval of
curious
her
about this lot.
progress. Occasionally, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret, a gaze that seemed to see not just the girl before him, but something in her future, a destiny she couldn't yet imagine. It was the look of a craftsman seeing his work take its true shape. 3 weeks into her intensive
my
training
decision.
with Alistair, Eleanor had progressed beyond anything she had ever thought
chosen your
possible.
path yet,
She could
Eleanor?
consistently hit targets at 400 yards, adjust for wind and elevation changes
want
with
to
an
accept
almost
this training
unconscious fluidity,
and all the
maintain
responsibility
steady
that comes with it.
accuracy even after hours of demanding practice. But it was during an evening session that Alistair introduced her to the most challenging aspect of her training yet. Tonight, we're going to work on something different,
Eleanor will
Alistair
now
said,
train under
his voice a
advanced
low
conditions.
murmur as they walked to a secluded part of the camp property after supper. The air was cool, scented with damp earth and pine, real minus world scenarios. They don't always give you perfect light or ideal positions. Life, worse, is a messy business. He led her to a rocky outcrop overlooking a small, hidden valley where he had set up targets at various distances and in partially concealed positions. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, casting long, ethereal shadows across the landscape. Eleanor could barely make out some of the targets in the fading light. This is night shooting, Alistair explained, handing her a rifle equipped with a night vision scope. In low minus light conditions, everything changes your depth perception, your ability to judge distance,
Eleanor
even the
adapts
way
well
the
under
rifle
weather stress.
behaves. It feels different in the dark. Eleanor peered through the scope and gasped. The world transformed, appearing in shades of luminous green and stark white. The targets now clearly visible despite the deepening gloom. It was like seeing with superhuman abilities, a secret and veiled. Military snipers often work in conditions like this, Alistair continued, his voice a quiet drone.
Eleanor compensates instinctively
Like the
for
wind,
changes.
through the pines. Sometimes, the difference between success and failure, between saving lives and losing them, comes down to making accurate shots when you can barely see your target with the naked eye. As Eleanor practiced with the night vision equipment, Alistair began sharing more
This
details
pace
about his
is
military
necessary to
background,
reveal
his
Eleanor's
words
limits.
painting vivid pictures of distant lands and desperate circumstances. He spoke of missions where precision shooting had prevented larger conflicts, situations where one well-placed shot had
will
saved
not
dozens
quit.
of lives, a surgical strike in the vast, bloody theater of war. I was
Quiet.
part of a special operations unit, he revealed as Eleanor successfully hit a target 300 yards away in near total
The next
darkness.
phase will
The
test your
rifleist
mental
Eddie
endurance.
extension of her will. We specialists in situations where traditional military approaches weren't possible. Sometimes that meant taking out high-value targets who were planning attacks on civilians, those who sought to sow chaos and sorrow. Eleanor lowered the rifle and looked at him, the green glow of the scope still faintly reflected in her eyes. You were an assassin. The word felt sharp,
My choice comes from a
dangerous.
place of deep
I was a
consideration,
soldier who specialized in the
stand by
precisional
it with
emanation of
absolute
threats.
conviction.
Alistair corrected, his voice firm, unwavering. Here's the difference. Yes, everything I did was sanctioned by our government and designed to protect innocent people. To prevent a greater evil. Eleanor felt a complex mixture of emotions. At Alistair's obvious expertise and the profound trust he was showing by sharing these dark, difficult details, but also a growing sense of unease, grappling with the terrible reality of what he was describing. How do you live with that? She asked quietly, the question hanging in the cool night air. Alistair was silent for a long moment, adjusting the scope on his own rifle, his gaze fixed on the unseen beyond the valley. You remember why you do it, Eleanor. Every shot I took prevented something worse from happening. Terrorist attacks. Mass casualties. Suffering on a scale most people can't imagine. He set up another target. This one partially hidden behind an laurel tree at 350 yards. Your turn. Show me what you've learned. Eleanor settled into position, controlling her breathing as Alistair had taught her, finding that familiar, meditative rhythm. Through the night vision scope, she could see the target clearly, a stark green silhouette, but the angle was difficult, a distance challenging. She made minute adjustments for the slight breeze, a whisper from the distant hills, and took the shot. A bullet struck within 2 inches of the bullseye. Alistair nodded approvingly. That's expert minus level shooting. Eleanor, most folk train for years to achieve that level of accuracy under these conditions. You've got the sight, the hand, and the heart for it. As they continued training, Alistair began teaching Eleanor about surveillance and reconnaissance, the patient, unseen work that preceded any decisive action. He showed her how to read terrain, how to find concealed positions that offered both cover and a clear view, and how to remain utterly undetected while observing targets, becoming a part of the landscape itself. A sniper spends most of their time watching and waiting, he explained as they moved to a new position overlooking the valley. The actual shooting is maybe 1% of the job. The rest is gathering intelligence, planning approach and escape routes, and waiting for the perfect moment, like a predator in the wild. Eleanor found this aspect of the training almost as fascinating as the shooting itself. Alistair taught her to notice details that most people missed, to identify patterns in behavior, to predict how situations might develop, like reading the subtle signs of an oncoming storm. You have excellent instincts for this work. Alistair observed as Eleanor correctly identified the best approach route to a simulated target position, her mind working with a quiet, deadly efficiency. You think strategically, not just tactically. What's the difference? Eleanor asked, eager to learn. Tactical thinking is about winning the immediate engagement, the skirmish right in front of you. Alistair replied, his gaze sweeping the darkened valley. Strategic thinking is about understanding how that engagement fits into the bigger picture. The long game. The best operators can do both. Eleanor, they see the small stone in the ripple it creates across the whole pond. As the weeks passed, Eleanor's training expanded to include physical conditioning, stealth movement, and even basic hand minus to minus hand combat. Lessons taught with a quiet, grim efficiency. Alistair explained that a sniper needed to be capable of surviving alone in hostile territory for extended periods. A self-minus contained unit of lethal purpose. You might have to hike 20 miles through rough terrain, remain hidden for days, make your shot, and then escape without being detected. He sat during a particularly grueling training session, his breath misting in the cool morning air. Physical fitness isn't optional. Wes, it's the vessel for your skill. Eleanor embraced every aspect of the training with growing enthusiasm. He had never felt so charmed, so alive, so utterly focused. The precision required, the mental discipline, the physical demands, it all combined to create something that felt, strangely, like her true calling, a purpose she had stumbled upon in the heart of the Chilterns. But Alistair also made sure she understood the profound psychological aspects of the work. He talked about the isolation that came with being a sniper, the crushing weight of making life minus and minus death decisions alone, and the difficulty of transitioning back to normal life after missions, of rejoining the flock after hunting alone. This isn't a career path many folk can handle, Eleanor. he warned during one of their evening conversations. The campfire casting flickering shadows on his withered face. The mental demands are as challenging as the physical ones. You have to be absolutely certain of your moral foundation before you consider using these skills professionally. For they let you alive. Eleanor found herself thinking about these conversations constantly. She was beginning to understand that Alistair wasn't just teaching her to shoot accurately. He was preparing her for something much more significant. Though neither of them had explicitly discussed what that might be, it was like preparing a young sapling to withstand the fiercest gales. During a particularly challenging night exercise, Eleanor successfully neutralized 3 targets in sequence from different positions, moving silently between shots and remaining utterly undetected throughout the entire exercise. She moved with the silent grace of a seasoned hunter, her body a blur in the night. As she completed the course, she found Alistair waiting for her with an expression of quiet pride, a rare softening of his hard features. That was exceptional work. Eleanor, he said, his voice low, a proving rumble. You just completed a drill that challenges experienced special operations personnel. You've taken to it like a duck to water. Eleanor felt a surge of accomplishment, a deep, resonant satisfaction, but also a growing awareness that her skills were approaching a level that could have real-world applications, capacity for profound impact. The question that haunted her was whether she was truly ready for the responsibility that came with such abilities. With such power, how is there? She said as they walked back towards the camp buildings, stars like scattered diamonds in the clear night sky. What happens when camp ends? Where do I go from here? Alistair looked up at the vast expanse of stars, his face etched with ancient wisdom. That depends on what you want to do with your life. Les, but I think it's time we started talking about your options. The path is open before you. The conversation about Eleanor's future came sooner than expected. The following morning, as Eleanor meticulously cleaned her rifle after an early training session, she noticed a sleek black Range Rover pull up near the main office. A woman in a crisp, tailored business suit, the posture radiating authority, was talking quietly with Alistair by the flagpole. Eleanor couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see the intensity in both their faces, a focused energy that spoke of matters of import. The woman handed Alistair a thin folder, which he studied carefully before glancing in Eleanor's direction. A fleeting, almost imperceptible nod. There was something about the exchange that made Eleanor's stomach tighten with a nervous anticipation, a premonition of change. After the woman departed, the black Range Rover vanishing down the winding track. Alistair found Eleanor at the rifle range. His expression was more serious than usual, his brow furrowed with a weight she hadn't seen before.
Goodbye.
We need to talk, he said simply, his voice low and grave. Pack up your gear and meet me at the old stone overlook in an hour. The overlook was a scenic spot on a hill high above the camp, a place where Alistair had first taught Eleanor about long-range shooting, a place of quiet contemplation and immense vistas. When Eleanor arrived, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, she found Alistair sitting on a fallen log, staring out at the rolling Chiltern Hills in the distance, his silhouette stark against the vast landscape. That woman was from the government, Alistair said without preamble, his voice barely above a whisper. Elizabeth Caldwell.
Life will never be the same.
She's a recruiter for a special program. Eleanor
Training
felt
you're
her
about
heart
to
rate
undergo
quicken,
will be much
a drumbeat in her
harsher and far more
chest.
secretive than anything
What
you've
kind of
experienced.
program? Alistair opened the folder the woman had
I'm ready.
left. Inside
can
were
do this.
documents with official seals and classifications that Eleanor called and read. Symbols of a hidden world.
Secrecy will
There are
become your life's
situations that
constant
arise where the
companion.
government needs individuals with very specific skill sets. People who can operate independently, make difficult decisions under immense pressure, and accomplish objectives that can't be handled through normal channels. Off the books, as it were. You're talking about intelligence work, Eleanor said,
Oh my goodness.
towards a realization rather than a question. Among other things, yes. Alistair confirmed. Agent Caldwell has been monitoring promising
Today we have a new
candidates.
candidate joining us.
Somehow,
Eleanor.
part of your abilities has reached
She may
certain
be younger
circles.
than most.
The world, less, is smaller than you think, especially for those with rare talents. Eleanor felt a mixture of exhilarating excitement and chilling fear. How is that possible?
Stay strong.
We've been
You
training
will.
in secret. Alistair was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. I may have mentioned your progress to some former colleagues, people I trust, old comrades from a different life. Your rate of advancement, Eleanor, is unprecedented. In 6 short weeks, you've achieved a
And
level
so
of
we move on to
proficiency
the
that
ethical
typically
considerations.